Pioneer, Bose, Samsung, Kenwood, JVC, LG, Sanyo, Sony. You guessed it, it's a video about stereotypes.
This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name.
Stereotypes are cliches as they pertain to behavior. They're generally thought of as bad things, and they exist for every single group that you can think of. A blonde girl who loves chasing boys and shopping, stereotype. A fat nerd boy who spends all his time drinking coke and playing video games, stereotype. A gay boy who loves musicals, fashion, and speaks with a lisp, stereotype. A gay girl who wears boy pants, has a monobrow and short bleached hair, stereotype. A good way to explain them is that if you didn't know a thing about any group of people and didn't bother to even do the most token research about them, what might you assume? Well, you'd assume what you'd seen in the media. That's where stereotypes come from. The same media that we're trying to contribute to with books. That means that we've got a choice. We can contribute to the stereotypes, or we can push back against them. There's no standing apart from them. If you choose to betray anyone and you include a laundry list of their stereotypical attributes, you're making the problem worse. If you choose not to do that, you're helping change the landscape. But whoa there. There is a problem with trying to push back against stereotypes. A lot of well-meaning people have done the same thing, and in the process, a bizarre eventuality occurs. Now, the complete opposite of the stereotype can also be a stereotype. Confusing, right? But trying to deliberately not be a stereotype by flipping the cliches over will do one of two things. It'll either create a brand new kind of stereotype, or it'll highlight the original stereotype by omission. Examples to illustrate. Creating a new stereotype that almost replaces the original. So, let's take a blonde girl. And the original stereotype is that she's airheaded, goes shopping, spends hours on her makeup, yada yada yada. Flipping that over, you get a whole new category. A hyper-intelligent, angry, tomboyish, usually action hero-esque girl. It becomes a new default. People come to expect those polar opposite traits, and before long, they're institutionalized and their own stereotypes. So, replacing one stereotype with another doesn't change anything. The goal isn't to simply subvert the original. The goal is to treat every single character, regardless of their traits and groups, as an individual worthy of respect and effort. Switching to anti-stereotype just carries on the problem in a brand new way. So another example, highlighting the original stereotype happens all the time. So you have gay characters that are presented as hyper-macho, captain of the football team, beer-drinking alpha males. Black characters who are presented as notably articulate and successful. It might not be obvious at first, but they're being presented in terms that directly kick back against the stereotype. Once again, the goal isn't to make the stereotype as a given and then show off how your character isn't like that. The goal is to rise above the stereotype completely and create a human being in his or her own right. Think of it like this. If in your descriptions you could preface every line with "unlike most other people of this kind," that's bad. Illustratively, Lucy had always been into girls. She had beautiful straight blonde hair and a trim figure that she kept wrapped in pink blouses. She had a high heel collection that made department stores look like a cupboard, and enough jewellery to warrant her own room in the Tower of London. Just think about that for a second. And Lucy had always been into girls. Unlike most other lesbians, she had beautiful straight blonde hair and a trim figure that she kept wrapped in pink blouses. She had a high heel collection that made department stores look like a cupboard, and enough jewellery to warrant her own room in the Tower of London. It's subtle, but it's sinister. Why is her straight blonde hair and trim figure important enough to mention so quickly? Why talk about her shoes and jewellery at all? Unless there is a really convoluted plot purpose to it, I'll tell you why. Because those are the stereotypical things that people are expecting by default. And somewhere deep down, it's what you're expecting Lucy to be like as well. That isn't anyone's fault, except the culmination of all the portrayals we've seen up to this point. So, what do we do about this? I've basically just said, don't write stereotypes, and then turned around and said, but don't not write stereotypes, right? Well, sort of. The cure to stereotypes is understanding. If you're worried you're going to accidentally write a stereotype or write such a non-stereotype that it is a stereotype, what you need to do is go out and do some research. Honest research. Show a genuine want to know what it's like to be one of those stereotyped folks. Talk to them. Get it from the horse's mouth. Then you won't stereotype horses. You'll find out that there's more than a grain of truth to some of the stereotypes. And as an aside, some people will have learned their behavior from those stereotypes, but that's for another video. You'll also find out that every single person deviates from those stereotypes in 100,000 ways. Your Asian friend might be really good at maths, sure, and he might even be great at martial arts, but his lifelong passion might be knitting and fly fishing for all you know. If you content yourself to get as far as, well, my Asian friend is really good at maths and martial arts, and then pat yourself on the back for a job well done, that's the damage that stereotypes have done. There's more to people than that. You don't have to begin and end with whether or not a character conforms or deviates from a stereotype. I guess what I'm advocating is that whether or not your character happens to do this or that stereotypical thing, or doesn't do them, should really be irrelevant. If you can leave those things well alone without having an impact on the story, FFS, do it. The overall respect you have for the individuality of the character will determine whether or not you get in trouble for conforming or deviating, obviously, from a stereotype. Sometimes you'll have to accept that not everyone can be pleased, but a good place to start is that quest for understanding. Read, talk, and get interested in cultural, racial, genderal, and orientational differences. See what's important and what matters. Make sure you communicate those things and ignore the rest. The rest is just writing about people being people. And I know you know how to do that. You're writers.